This podcast is meant for general health information and is not meant to override any medical advice. All questions will be screened and not contain any personal information. If you want a private consultation, contact us via positivechoice.org, or you can contact your provider directly. Thank you and enjoy the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Positive Choice Wellness Podcast. My name is Melanie, and I'm an exercise physiologist.
My name is Kimberly, and I'm a registered dietitian.
And we have back again, potentially indefinitely, we have Brandon with us again today. Hi, Brandon.
Woo! Hi, Brandon.
Hey, my name's Brandon. I have a master's degree in kinesiology. I am a master personal trainer, adjunct professor, published fitness writer, and I'm super excited to be on this podcast again.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. So what's great is when Brandon was hired, our supervisor was like, hey, this guy, he is like super into research. You should totally have him on the podcast. And we're like, all right, we're down. And here he is.
Let's do it.
And part of that was when he was researching, we came to the discussion of what topic we wanted to talk about today. And the topic of social media and its influence on our health and wellness goals kind of sort of cropped up in that conversation we had. And, you know, we probably have recognized at this point in our lives, at least with our field that we're in, that social media can be a little disingenuous as far as what types of information we're receiving. And what I thought would be great is we have our extra special, super extra guest we have coming on, the unrivaled fitness influencer.
Hey everyone, I'm the unrivaled fitness influencer. Prepare to enter in a new era of fitness and nutrition revelation. As the unrivaled expert in this field, I'm about to unveil jaw-dropping breakthroughs that will leave you questioning everything that you thought you knew about health and wellness. So brace yourselves for miraculous insights that will ignite your body's hidden potential, propelling you forward to unprecedented levels of strength, vitality, and well-being. So don't miss out on this. Join me now and witness the transformational power of cutting-edge science and revolutionary strategies.
Right. Thank you so much, unrivaled fitness influencer friend. But I'm curious what some of these claims might be. What are some of these claims that you maybe have been sharing with all this really in-depth research that you've been finding out about these things?
Yeah, you know, research shows that as soon as you wake up in the morning, you need to do a cold plunge to maximize your workout or whatever activity you're going to do that day. If you don't start off with a cold plunge, you're going to have all this inflammation and it's going to prevent you from making progress in your fitness and in your health. And you're also going to want to make sure that you avoid anything besides water for the first 12 hours upon waking up so that you don't stop your mitotic cell mitosis cleaning system, because if you do drink water before then or anything else, your hormones will be out of balance, your gut will be in disarray, and your immune system will be in shambles. Once you do start eating though, you're going to make sure that you only eat organic and non-GMO foods, and we're going to stay away from anything we can't pronounce on the ingredient labels. We're going to demonize certain macronutrients. If you're also, this is the last thing I'll say, because I have a lot to say. If you are doing a squat, that exercise is garbage. Stop doing a squat. Don't ever squat again. And the reason why is because it's destroying your knees.
That's a lot of information. Thank you, unrivaled fitness influencer. We'll bring Brandon back now.
Hey, I'm back, everybody.
Yay, Brandon's back. You sure sounded so much alike. So I was curious. So that was a lot of things that were claimed. And those are things that are actually floating around social media that people are exposed to on a daily basis?
Yeah, these are things that I see a lot on a daily basis. And I have my patients and clients asking me about a lot of those claims and things that I shared.
You know, Kimberly, as a dietitian, did he say anything that intrigued you? Maybe?
Maybe just a couple things. Yes, absolutely. I know it's astonishing the the buzzwords that you throw out there, you know, to like grab attention and that kind of thing, because they really know how to rope us in and make us think that like this is it, this is the thing that's gonna work, you know. Anyway,
so it feels like almost deceptive, because obviously, you know, as a professional in this field, as all of us are professionals in this field, there can, I think, be a lot of misinformation that kind of comes out of the woodwork on social media, and that can be a little confusing. And, you know, some of this, I think, with some of those highlighted topics, Brandon, if you want to kind of address some of the things you mentioned, like what are some of the realities around what was claimed by that suspiciously similar fitness influencer we just spoke with?
Well, it can be hard to know what to focus on as you're scrolling through your feed. There are a lot of things that we see on our feed that pop out at us that seem really interesting, like what is cold plunging? What supplements should I take? When should I take them? What's the best time to drink coffee? What's the best time to have my protein shake? And a lot of those things can be confusing and they can trip us up. They can make it hard for us to know what to focus on. So I have a table or a list of things that will help our listeners know what more to focus on as they're scrolling their feed. And then some examples of maybe some things that they could focus a little bit less on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something to focus more on, and then something to focus less on. So I'll go ahead and go through that list now. So some things that we're going to want to focus more on when it comes to posts on social media is posts that are about just lifting weights in general a few times a week as a recommendation versus a post that says this is the perfect workout and it looks super cool. They're using all this equipment in really interesting ways. We're probably going to want to focus on those type of posts a little bit less. Mm-hmm. We're going to want to focus on posts that are more about maybe walking a little bit more every day, how to incorporate some strategies to get more movement in throughout the day versus posts about obscure supplements that there isn't hardly any research on. We're going to want to focus on things like drinking more water, making sure we're getting enough fiber and protein in our diet versus posts that are about really complicated diets that have a barrier to entry, that have expensive ingredients, that are really time consuming. We're going to want to focus lastly on posts about strategies to get more sleep, just getting enough sleep in general, and making small changes consistently rather than posts about when exactly you should drink your coffee in the morning or when you should have your protein shake during a workout day. There's going to be a lot of posts that are about the big single solution to your health. And I think that in general, we should focus less on those type of posts and just more on the posts that are about those things that I had just shared about getting enough sleep, making sure getting enough water, things like that.
Yeah, what you essentially listed off was like our basic needs and just target like the basic things we need to do to be a healthy individual. Sleep more, eat well, exercise a little bit here or there when you can. Do what you can as best as you can in small steps that are reasonable for you, which I agree with. I think that is a fantastic approach. I just feel like I don't see a lot of posts oriented around that on social media. I don't see a lot of posts. Like, I know who I follow. I do follow people who definitely do that kind of stuff, and that's what they tend to talk about in their stuff. Because anyone who goes into these extreme things, I'm like, I'm not following them anymore. But I already, like you and Kimberly, have an idea of what to be looking out for, whereas the average person may not necessarily have that know-how or what to do in those scenarios. So is there like a clue in? Is it just like this big extravagant claim that's just that clue in? Like, how can someone really find out if what this person is saying isn't necessarily founded in research,
Yeah, that's a great question. And you had said something earlier that you don't really see a lot of posts that are just about getting more sleep, getting enough protein.
Not the popular ones.
Right. They're not popular. Well, why aren't they popular? Well, it's something called the algorithm. So the algorithm is this system that automates what you see on your Facebook or social media feed. And the algorithm limits content that is kind of boring, that is kind of just general, that is not sensational. It really loves sensational content. It loves big claims. It loves claims that are about you shouldn't do this or you have to do this. And it doesn't really prioritize posts that teach us basic good things. And so that's what we're up against. We're up against an algorithm. So it's important to know what we're fighting against when it comes to finding good, relevant information on social media. And if you don't realize that the algorithm doesn't care that you see posts about eating more fiber and protein, it'd rather have you get a post about a complicated diet, then it's kind of just like walking blindly somewhere or without a guide or without street signs, without navigation.
Yeah. And because kind of like to the original question, obviously, the algorithm is guiding us in a way towards what is most popular and most clickable and likable and what have you. We're walking blindly. And so that's, I think, that big question of like, well, how do we navigate that? How do we know? Like, are we, because I myself personally, when I was in my early days in grad school, I was like falling victim to some of those like weird health trends that were happening back like 10 years ago, and I was Like, oh, I'll make my own deodorant from scratch. That's what I should do. It turns out, don't do that. That was a very bad idea, I learned, because baking soda does not work on your skin like you think. It's a base. And I have basic chemistry knowledge. I should have known better, but here we are. I fell victim just like everyone else did. And that's why I'm curious, like, how can we help people not fall victim to that and fall into these trends that may not necessarily be founded in science?
Yeah, well, let's get into some of those red flags to look out for. Kimberly, any red flags that you've seen as a registered dietitian on social media that would be really helpful for our patients to know about?
Yeah, I mean, an abundant amount, I feel like I would say, but anything that claims to be like the cure all, you know, like any kind of like superfood
How about those
claim.
gummies?
Yes, the gummies.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, any like cleanse detoxy situation, like so many like that to me are red flag terms. And honestly, anything that, what I tell patients too, anything that basically is like countering something that we've known to be true for a very long time, I would consider a red flag situation as well. Like, for example, all of a sudden, if you see that eating plants for you is the worst, we'd be like, oh, okay, maybe I should question that a little bit, you know? But yeah, there's those, that's what sticks out to me primarily would be like cleanse, detoxes, superfoods, like, you know, eat this, be full forever. I don't know.
Yeah, those are good ones. Some like terms that I see a lot that I think are red flags is if you see jaw dropping or breakthrough, miraculous, words like that, unprecedented. Those words they catch our attention, but there's a reason they need to use a word like that to catch our attention.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting because I was sharing with Brandon, there was a study that came out about 9 years ago. And I say study loosely because it was a journalist who actually created a fake study to prove kind of how like the media and even social media will kind of blow things out of proportion sometimes. And when it comes to anything weight loss, that is 100% what's going to happen. And what was interesting is this article, the study that he created was called Chocolate with a High Cocoa Content as a Weight Loss Accelerator by Johannes Bohannon. And basically stating that if you eat a really, really high dark chocolate content cocoa, you'll have more success in weight loss than any other group. Like anybody, you'll lose more weight. But it was completely made up. There's absolutely no actual science in this study. It is completely false. And the media saw it. It's not even a peer-reviewed journal. He paid just to be in a journal that's not even peer-reviewed. So the media saw it, grabbed it, and it was all over the headlines for like 2 weeks straight of how chocolate helps you lose weight. And it was the weight loss. That's another buzzword, keyword that I think we don't realize is a keyword there, because that spread like wildfire almost 10 years ago. And and people still believe that to this day. And it's not real.
That's a good point, though, that even terms that you wouldn't think are buzzwords are, right? Like weight loss or like muscle gain, right? Or like those kinds of things. Or one that gets me, I'll not gonna lie, is like torch calories, you know, those kinds of things for sure.
Of course.
Yeah. And so some other things that we can look out for is fear mongering. If there's a post and it starts out by, you feel scared, you're like, oh no, like, am I eating that? Like, is that ingredient in the food?
Thank you.
That is a red flag to me.
Thank you. I so appreciate you mentioning that, because I have to tell people all the time, because basically what I do is I watch every documentary that comes out about health and wellness. Like anytime a new one's out, I watch it. And it's not necessarily because I want to. It's because the people that I work with watch it and then they ask me about it. And the number one thing I have to remind them, because when I watch it, I'll know right away, are they fear mongering or not? If you watch it and you feel that sense, like get that sensation of, oh no, did I screw up? Am I doing things wrong? Do I have to completely overhaul my diet? That's a big red flag that they are trying to sensationalize something that maybe doesn't have a lot of scientific support. So they have to make you feel bad and guilt you into doing it.
Yeah. To add to this list that we're going through, some other things that are red flags are going to be if someone advocates for removing an entire macronutrient. Now, if we're talking about disease reversal diets, I'm sure there's some exceptions we can make. But if they're removing a whole entire nutrient, like say a fat or a protein or a certain micronutrient, or they just straight up demonize certain foods, that's a red flag. I really like heard this a long time ago from a registered dietitian, but she said there's foods we should have more of and foods we should have less of. And that was a big difference to me from there's good foods and there's bad foods.
Yeah.
And so good foods and bad foods that's some terminology that I think should raise some yellow flags, at least when we're perusing the social media. Also, if someone says, never do this, you should always do this, you speaking in absolutes, that's a red flag. People who try to scare you out of eating certain foods and then they recommend an alternative that's way more expensive, that's way more time consuming, that's way less accessible, that should be a red flag, because maybe there's some merit to what they're saying, but then they're saying you need to spend all this money and spend all this time as an alternative. It's probably not true. We know that in our healthy balance classes that those things aren't true to be healthy.
Yeah. Anything where they get into extremes, like yes or no, black or white, can or can't, should or shouldn't, you got to be really wary of that, because when it comes to food, it's complicated and there's really no inherently bad food. I could argue there probably are inherently good foods, but I like the phrasing of choosing more, choosing less way more than I do about inherently bad, inherently good, because, wouldn't it suck if someone's like, bread is bad, you can never eat bread. And you'd be like, well, watch me go buy a loaf and eat the whole thing, because like you can't tell me what to do. Because that's how I respond when people say don't have something. Like, don't eat that. I'm like, oh, well, now I want it more. Yeah. It puts it on a pedestal almost. It's a little confusing.
I totally agree. And one thing I feel like social media does not love, for example, is fruit. Fruit's one of those that like, don't ever eat it. All the sugar in fruit, which is very, very different than the sugar that's like sitting in your cabinets. So yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah. So basically what we're seeing is just a lot of tactics that are used by influencers essentially to garner more clicks and likes and traffic through their pages, which may not necessarily be providing their audience with actual factual information, and I've seen that with people that should know better, but then they do it anyways.
Yeah. So it's like, we got to ask ourselves, what's this influencer's motivation for posting this content? When we see a picture of a fitness influencer at the beach in a bikini doing an exercise, we got to ask ourselves, how many shots did they have to take before they got that pose or they got that rep? Why are they using such light weights? Well, maybe they don't want to get tired doing all those shots to show you this exercise. I mean, after a lecture I gave on progressive overload, I had a woman come up to me in my class and she showed me an account. She said, I really like this account because she's a woman closer to my age in her 50s. And look, she's using these little tiny weights at the beach, but her body can't look like that with those little weights because you just talked about progressive overload. And she's like, well, and then she asked me the big golden question, why is she using those little weights? And I told her, well, because she probably had to shoot that 20 times. And it's just easier to use the smaller weights. So there's a whole hidden side to that final product that you see on that post.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not the reality that you or I are going to experience every time we do something similar.
Oh,
and
big time.
That's good.
Yeah. And it gets into our psychology. Like, why then are we attracted to these types of posts? Why do these big claims get us? And I think that we just as humans have a tendency to not want to hear or pursue the basics, the essentials. And the truth is, though, is that the basics and the essentials are the things that are going to give us the biggest return. So if we're not even getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night, why are we going to go chase the thing that is probably only going to provide maybe at best a 0.1% return when that sleep is giving us a 10% return? So that's the piece that is hard to accept. But once us as humans can realize, no, I need to work on the essentials, that's when we can start to move forward. I just had a patient last night. He really wanted to know, what calories should I be at? And how much should I weigh? He wanted to know what his ideal weight was. And this is what I talked to him about. I said, hey, I don't really know. Maybe it's 170, maybe it's 180. I don't know. Maybe you should be at 1800, maybe 2000. I don't know. But here's what I think would be better to put your focus into is being able to train and exercise so that next time you go snowboarding with your nieces, you can keep up with them. Like those are the things in life that matter, not whether we weigh 5 pounds more or 5 pounds less.
Like that. I do think that's an important point too, because we get too caught up in like the minutia of health and wellness sometimes. oh, I got to make sure I'm eating like X amount of grams of this or like a certain level of that or keep a certain percentage of these vitamins. And it's like, well, are you drinking enough water? Did you sleep 8 hours? Are you managing your stress? Like, there are so many other factors that maybe you're not doing those, but you're trying to do this little minutia. You're probably a little more likely going to fail now because those other things are far more important to get you in a place to be able to do the minutia, if that's really what your goal was, which even then, still not super significant in the grand scheme of things. Because we've all had these patients. I know Kimberly's like sitting there and I can see it. It's like, oh yeah, I know people like that.
Yes, I know. I half wonder if people like, I can't speak for everybody, but have the thought of like, if that's just too simple, right? Like getting the sleep, drinking the water, that's too simple. There's no way that's it, or they try it for like 2-3 days and they're like, I'm not seeing that number on the scale change. So I got to do something that feels more drastic, more intense, more like whatever, when really isn't simplicity what we're looking for? Like, don't we want it to be like a little less complicated? I don't know. Maybe that's just
I had a patient once, and I always think back to this because I was talking about hydration, and the best way for determining your hydration is, unfortunately, you have to look at your urine color. That is really the only true way to know. Yep. And they didn't believe me. And so I was like, hey, we got to drink, a certain amount of water. You got to check this, you got to check that. And they're like, oh, well, I drink enough water. I'm like, well, how much water do you drink? Like, well, I have like 6 bottles of water a day. And they're talking like 12-ounce bottles of water. I'm like, okay, not terrible, right? And they're like, but I'm really struggling, like things aren't moving very well. I'm a little constipated. And I was like, well, maybe you need to drink more water. Like, well, I have enough. It's like, well, maybe just try drinking more. Just try. Just see what happens. And they come back the next week and they're like, well, it worked. I needed to drink more water. Like sometimes it's not more fiber, it's more water, right? Like sometimes it's super simple and we're trying to make it way more complicated, which I absolutely hear that. And I've seen it. And I'm sure Brandon has experienced this as well, where people just don't even want to believe it. Is it really that simple? Really? I don't need to do a handstand. Like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just nutrition, it's exercise too. People are like, oh, I can't just, the walk is too simple. It's got to be like a whole thing with acrobatics. No, but
yeah.
And then I have people asking me to teach them how to make an exercise program, and they think it's so complicated and every day needs to be completely different than the next. But really it's like, are you pushing? Are you pulling? Are you hinging?
Yeah.
Pick 5 exercises of those things and work on those 5 for a long time. There's a reason I don't post my workouts on social media. It's because they're really boring. They're the same thing, just slightly different. Yeah, it's
the
like
staple moves. Yes.
Every workout, I'm doing a push.
Yeah.
I might use a dumbbell one day. I might use a body weight the next day, but it's simple.
Yeah.
So you got to embrace the simplicity. Embrace it.
Yes.
We
Be
do
grateful
not need
for
to make
it.
things complicated. Which is so on the topic of exercise, because now we're in our realm, and sorry, Kimberly, we're gonna shove you out.
No, do it.
No, you can contribute. It's fine. Okay. So this is something that, like, when I'm at the gym and I see people doing bizarre things on equipment, and I think I was talking with Brandon the other day. There was like one movement I see with the pull-up machine where it kind of like it's a modified pull-up machine where basically you can add weight to like negate your own, essentially, so it's lighter for you. You're not pulling up your full body weight, like half your body weight or whatever. And I see people put the pin in there, and then the little platform you're supposed to stand on, they stick their foot on it and they push it down. And like the nickname we have for that, we call that bug squashers. Like, I don't know what it's called. I don't care. It's not a move, but they do it. And so I was like, what the heck is this thing you're doing? You're taking my machine that I want to use for what it is for, and you're squishing a bug repeatedly. And like, I talked to Brandon about this the other day because I was like, it drives me nuts. And so like the theory is what they're working their quads, right? Like that's the intention, or is it the glutes? Because like to me, that feels like a quad workout, but it's still
sounds
dumb.
like a step up without stepping up kind of thing.
I think they think it's for the glutes. Because, they have a big anterior pelvic tilt going on, and they're looking off to the side as they do it. I don't know.
Okay, that leads me to a question then, because one that I've seen that's super popular on social media. I don't have a gym membership. I have a home gym. But I think it's like a quad extension machine. And granted, I'm a woman, so a lot of like female-y type workouts, probably because the algorithm appear on my social media. They kind of wiggle their way in there and do like hip thrusters using that leg extension machine. Like, so that's just what made me think
I've seen that before.
Yeah, people doing things with the machines that I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting.
The hip thrust exercise has blown up thanks to some people, specifically Brett Contreras, who invented it. But yeah, it's a legit exercise. It's a hip hinge. It gets a lot of glute activation, not as much quad and hamstring. So it's a hip bridge. It's a glute bridge. You know, a lot of us teach our patients glute bridges. Well, the hip thrust, it's a glute bridge. People are just coming up with all sorts of creative ways to do it.
Yeah, I was like, I think the bigger issue is they're using my machine. That's not for what it's for. Like, that's my problem with it.
I mean, they have machines that do that now.
Yeah,
a lot of different types.
I've actually used a literal hip bridge machine. It is awesome. I used it actually when I was in the UK, of all places.
Radical.
But it's just, I see some interesting, I use interesting in this phrase because I don't know what else to call it. Interesting things when I go to the gym. And I have to think to myself, that seems like something someone saw online, because I, being in this field, knowing what I know, doing what I've done for over a decade, don't understand what they're trying to accomplish. Like, it's bizarre. Like, it doesn't feel like a normal pattern. It's like I've seen someone, for example, it was like Frogger style, where they put all these box jumps across the gym and we're like leaping across the box jumps across the gym like that. Yeah. And it's like circle pattern. And I was like, oh, okay, but you could just jump up one repeatedly.
I don't know. Maybe they saw a post about incorporating play into their fitness, and I'm just being devil's advocate.
But yeah, so when you're looking at, like, let's say exercise examples on social media, and you see videos of people doing unique and different exercises that you haven't seen before, and you're like, oh, that looks really cool. The question now is, like, how can you determine, is that an actual functional training exercise that would be useful for you, or is it just because it looks cool? Like, how can you differentiate? We know, of course, but like, how could the average person differentiate for those types of things?
I think the biggest thing to consider is this exercise helping me accomplish my goal? Is this exercise providing the desired outcome that I want from it? Mm-hmm. And if it is, then great. If it's not, then maybe try a different variation. So I just had a client today. I was having him do a bent over row. And he said, oh, my friend taught me to not put my thumb around the handle because then I'll get more back. Which is right? Is he right or is you right? And I said, well, what's your desired outcome? Is it to feel your back more and less biceps? Or is it just to do a row? And he said, oh, I just care about doing a row. I just want to work out. And I said, well, I don't think it matters then. So I always get people asking me these types of questions. Is this technique right or is this technique right? It's very subjective. You just need to ask yourself, does this technique help move me closer to the desired outcome that I want? Yeah. So that's really that's what I tell people now. Technique is subjective, because I can teach someone how to do a squat and then they go watch a squat at the gym on their phone because they kind of forgot what I taught them. And then the next day they said, oh, this YouTuber was teaching it differently than you. And I said, I don't know, maybe they're teaching you more of a competition style squat, or maybe their goals were to have more strict and controlled form because they are lifting more weight, because lifting the most amount of weight is their goal. For you, we're just trying to work out. So
I like that.
It's very subjective, but it doesn't need to be what is right or what is best. It is just like what is going to help you the most.
I like that. And for those of you listening, don't use machines weird at the gym. I will judge you. No, I'm just kidding. But no, what I was going to say though, so for the longest time, I used to teach swim lessons. So I was a swim instructor for the longest time. I was a lifeguard. And I like to swim. I actually do master swim team kind of situation. I'm a swimmer. That's my thing. I like swimming. And I always find it funny when I talk to people about swimming and they're like, oh, I'm terrible. Like, it looks awful. And I'm like, well, hey, you're burning more calories that way. Good for you. Sometimes you can be really bad at something, but you're not doing it in a dangerous way. You're just not very good at it. And you actually expend more energy when you're doing things poorly in the water by technicality. So you actually get more bang for your buck. If your goal is to burn more calories, go swim bad. Do it. Just don't drown. But do it, I'm a big proponent of it doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's not hurting anybody or yourself.
Yes.
And
thank you.
just gets you to where you need to be, agreeing with you and moving you towards your goal, closer to your goal rather than further away from it.
Absolutely.
Yes. And if we do not have that mindset, what we're actually doing to our clients and patients is we're creating kinesiophobia. We're creating barriers that don't need to be barriers, that don't need to be there. I mean, look at the statistics of physical activity in the United States. I mean, so you're telling me you're going to get a client who actually wants to do something good for themselves. They're going to come in and then you're going to see their foot pronate a little bit and say, oh, you can't squat, you're going to get injured. And that person's going to be terrified. And then they're never going to squat again. And then maybe they're just scared about something else. And then they're back on the couch. So it's like, I really like your approach, Melanie. You nailed it. We do not want to create barriers that don't need to exist. We don't want to catastrophize technique that is not 100% perfect. We're okay with 50%. I mean, as long as everything's controlled and we're there, and
Yeah, very seldom do I jump in and do this like correction of like, oh no, that's horrible. Like I don't really do that unless it's like, oh no, you got to do something different. You're going to hurt yourself. Like that's usually where I will come in if I'm like, that is going to be catastrophic, like literally, because I've seen people do some like, oh, I'm going to grab one TRX strap over here and then one over there. And it's two different straps. You're like, no, don't do that. Like they're going to be all wonky. That's very dangerous. But like generally speaking, though, as far as like movement patterns, for example, I was working with someone this morning and she was doing tricep press downs with a band. So it was just really close to her body. But then towards the end, she started like leaning. She wasn't actually moving her arm. She was rocking from side to side. And I had to stop her and be like, hey, let's push the hand down. She'd do it like once and then start leaning again and rocking back and forth. And, I wouldn't say I was going in as a form stickler for like, oh no, it has to be perfect. It was more of like, you're actually just not doing anything. And I want you to do something.
Exactly. You're like, that form you're doing is not actually achieving our desired outcome that we want. So that's when you stepped in. That's cool. That's totally okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, I guess the last kind of like, we're towards the tail end here. So kind of the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on, of course, is like the whole crux of it, maybe not even just specific to exercise, but, to know credibility, to know, is this something that's actually valid? Is there a way to find that out? Like, obviously, they're not going to tell you. They're going to claim it is because that's what their job is. But how can we find that out?
I kind of have the same question because I feel like people can go online and claim to be anything, right? Or claim to have like any kind of credential or like whatever, and it not be legit. So I don't know. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts. I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, hopefully someone's claiming they have some kind of educational background, and they're not just like popular or attractive. And that's why like, they're making all these claims, but yeah, I don't know how you vouch for someone's credibility, really.
I know.
Okay.
I know what I did at least for the documentary one time. And that was because I was watching it and a woman came up and said she was nutritionist. And when you see the word nutritionist, you can pay $60 online and be a nutritionist. You don't have to go to school for that.
Melanie, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Everyone's like, what's the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Education.
Thank you.
So I see that she's a nutritionist. So immediately, like, this is a documentary about food. And the second a nutritionist walks on screen is the second I'm like, now I have to look up her credentials. So I'm not even watching the documentary anymore. I'm on her website and she sells gummies. She sells diet detox teas. She's selling all sorts of garbage. And I'm like, she's an influencer who's claiming to be a nutritionist who actually is not providing us with any factual information here. Cause now I don't really have I don't think anything she's saying is going to be valid at this point because the way she's advertising herself. And that's at least one way that I found it. Cause like, I'm a skeptic. I'll come in like, I don't know who you are. Let me look you up. But of course, not everyone's like me. So Brandon, what would you do?
Yeah, true.
Well, we had talked about how we want to start incorporating research into these podcasts and sharing some of the research. So I actually found a few research papers that are on the topic of credibility screening and content analysis on social media. Okay. And this one paper that I found from DMC Public Health in 2023 said that there are 4 things that we can look for or use as an audit tool to identify credible fitness accounts or just social media accounts. And so what those things are is one, so in other words, here are the 4 red flags that this study identified while like running tons of accounts through this screening. So the first thing is going to be sexualization or objectification. If that is present in the majority of this account's posts, they're more than likely not going to be the best source of fitness information or education.
Okay.
The second thing that they included was nudity, which, I mean, kind of inappropriate clothing, and that makes sense. That kind of goes in the lines of the first thing they shared. Number 3 is going to be sharing, they're going to only present extreme body types. So like the societal perfect male body or female body with the preferable proportions of this body part and that body part. If they're only showing things like that, that is a red flag. And then last thing is going to be like negative messaging around body types. Like say, for example, they have a hashtag thin inspiration. Things like that are actually going to be damaging to a lot of people. In fact, I found a meta-analysis of online social media content regarding fitness. And this meta-analysis looked at like 10 years worth of studies on social media to find the impact that social media had on people. And for example, Fitspiration, which is defined as online images and content that aims to promote fit, toned, and athletic bodies and healthy lifestyles via dieting and exercise, can have detrimental effects, which includes increased body dissatisfaction, disordered eating, and unsafe exercise behaviors. So I think what this meta-analysis is saying is that those who mainly get their content from pages with a lot of red flags have a greater likelihood of having body dissatisfaction, of disordered eating. Yeah.
Oh.
Because the algorithm tends to only show us the societal ideal feminine body and male body. And when that's all you're seeing all day and you don't have that, it can have those negative effects. That makes a lot of sense. Because like another research paper I looked at, they wanted to find like what are the attributes that people look for to find a fitness influencer to follow. And one of the top ones was attractiveness. Isn't that?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. So it's like they didn't look for what degrees they had in their profile. They didn't look for their overall mission statement, on the top of their profile. They were looking for attractiveness.
Yeah.
So
seems like a very valid way to determine someone's qualifications. How cool do they look?
Yeah. Maybe what we could do is like Melanie, you mentioned like some of you have some favorite social media accounts. Maybe you could open those up and like talk about like their profile and like what is good that you see in there. Cause like I have a couple up myself, so I won't say who these are, but this person has MS for like a master's degree after their name, and then CSCS, which is a really good fitness certification. And then her mission statement is helping improve your relationship with food, fitness, and your body. That to me, there's no red flags in any of that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Obviously, looking at what their qualifications are, what exactly are they educated in? Because, you want someone like, I have a degree in finance. Let me teach you how to squat. It's like, yeah, you're qualified. But what I will say, unfortunately, it's about that time. We have to wrap up here. But what is important is we can definitely have a further conversation about what we're talking about right now, because this is a deep dive. We can go way deeper. We're only at the surface level right now. We can go even deeper than that, because it is a complex thing, right? Social media isn't so simple as I just to do this, it's fine. But with that being said, do you want to give us kind of a quick little summary, just a general takeaway from this topic today, Brandon?
So the takeaway that I would like everyone to have from this is to try to focus on social media accounts that talk about things that maybe are more boring to you, like simple. What I'd hope that people would take away from this is to gravitate towards content that is more simplicity, that is more about you're improving your relationship with food, with exercise, with your overall health, with your mindset. Focusing on posts about that rather than posts that are about a specific complicated diet or some perfect exercise that will give you the body you want that looks really cool. We're going to want to focus less on those things. We're going to want to probably stay away from accounts that don't have some sort of credentials at the top of it, like a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or gold standard certifications.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to want to stay away from sensationalism because we have to understand the algorithm just wants to show us that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the summary, and I hope that everyone listening will be able to take this and utilize this information and be a little bit more informed when they're traversing social media in terms of what they're looking for and their goals and their fitness and their wellness. But unfortunately, we must go. So with that being said, make sure for those of you who are listening to like, share, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment underneath the video. And with that, until next time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.